You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Okay, let's examine revolution. And what a revolution is the sudden and violent overthrow of existing political conditions so as to reach equitable distribution of the resources for the majority of the population. And so a revolution means that you're going to transform society, but usually it's done through violence. And a revolution means that you want change now. And so there's many different revolutions that are going to occur in Latin America in the 20th century. And these revolutions are going to prepare us to understand the modern existence today, especially in the next unit with regards to the rise of what is known as the pink tide, and then now what's going on today with regards to the movements for change. So let's start with Mexico. Mexico is the one that starts the revolutionary process, especially at the turn of the century. Now, what are the causes of the Mexican Revolution that lasts from 1910 to 1940? Basically, the native elite and foreign investors controlled everything. And the rural peasantry and the urban working classes are going to unite to change institutions. So everybody remembers the events and the leaders, and I'm not going to go through all of the Mexican Revolution itself. But there was Madero, the plan of San Luis Potosí, which called for effective suffrage and no re-election. It was a vague plank on political reform with no change in social and economic structures. And this plank is going to be overthrown by a reactionary known as Huerta in 1913. So it's going to be many different segments in the Mexican Revolution that are going to transform society, and they're going to create one of the most important constitutions ever, and those are Zapata, Villa, Carranza, and Obregón. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go specifically into each revolutionary figure, but the idea is to implement change for the masses. Unfortunately, the middle class is going to be favored over the masses until there's going to be a president named a president named Cárdenas who's going to come to power in the 1930s during the Great Depression, and he's going to be one of the most radical presidents that is going to put into effect what the revolution had called for in 1910. He accelerated and redistributed land. He called for rapid industrialization. He was the first president of Latin America to shift the power base to the popular masses. He's going to expropriate the natural resources, oil especially, from foreigners who refuse to raise the wages of workers, and he's going to favor the working class unions. So the consequences and the results of Mexican Revolution, it was the first effort in Mexico to divide the past from the present and future. It was the first movement in Latin America that made significant social, political, and economic transformations. Because when you take a look at the Constitution, Mexican Constitution that was written as a result of the revolution, in 1917, it was a landmark for change. Article 27 implements land reform. Article 123 provides a labor code. Article 130 deals with the reform of the church. However, not all institutions were transformed completely, and this failure permitted old institutions to reappear, especially the landed oligarchy. A new privileged elite emerged to absorb the national income, and with World War II, foreign capital is going to re-enter to play a dominant role in and primarily the United States. And with this, the revolution in Mexico, quote unquote, became frozen. No more land reform. Unions are going to be attacked. And the U.S. role complained bitterly during the revolutionary years about the destruction of their investments. However, they played a hands-off role, and eventually they're going to back Carranza. They attacked Villa. They refused to recognize certain presidents, especially Obregón and Cárdenas, and they re-entered the economy with investments during and after World War II. And since then, we're going to talk about that throughout, all the way into the 21st century. Most of the presidents after 1940 are going to be educated at Ivy League schools, and then they're going to be nurtured to become president in Mexico. Now let's take a look at Guatemala. Guatemala is going to enter a revolution between 1944 to 1954. Now the causes of that revolution are illiteracy, low life expectancy, poor nutrition, low per capita income, heavy taxation on the masses. The students, the intellectuals, and the workers are going to unite and take over. And they will challenge this one general, a military leader, Jorge Ubico, because the elites, the foreigners, are going to be in control in Latin America. So events are going to occur where a man named Juan José Arévalo and the National Revolutionary Party are going to overthrow the Ubico in 1944. And they're going to call for a new constitution similar to Mexico's. They're going to authorize land reforms, create new rights for labor, abolish Ubico's forced labor system. They're going to create Social Security. But Arévalo recognized the importance of labor support. Legislation was passed. No special privileges were given to foreigners. It stirred up nationalistic sentiment. It encouraged workers to dispute with the management of a very important U.S. corporation known as the United Fruit Company. There was a powerful coalition of peasants and workers that emerged. It was industrial development and encouraged industrialization, but it allowed foreigners to compete with expanded education. And then in 1954, Colonel Jacobo Arbenz, a military leader, wanted to decrease Guatemala's dependency on the United States, so he advocated land reform. He created what is known as the Agrarian Land Reform Law of 1952, which meant that any uncultivated land was subject to expropriation and distribution. The law provided compensation. He built highways to end transportation monopoly of United Fruit's railroad. The United Fruit Company owned the railroads. They constructed a hydroelectric plant to compete with the control of electricity by the United Fruit Company, and they emphasized Guatemalan nationalism. But the United States is going to interfere directly in this revolutionary experience. The United Fruit Company, the director of the CIA, Allen Dulles, was a member of the United Fruit Company, and his brother, the Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, were closely connected to United Fruit Company. In fact, that's where they make their money. They denounced Arévalo as a communist. They hated Arbenz for his positions. So the CIA is going to directly intervene in the Guatemalan Revolution. They're going to create an embargo of arms sales to Guatemala. They're going to equip the counter-revolutionary army under Castillo Armas. They're going to finance the Guatemalan invasion. And U.S. Ambassador Jay Purifoy is going to handle the change of governments. So the consequences and the results is that the revolution presented the desire for change in Latin America. However, since not all changes in Guatemala were consistent, the old ideas still persisted, and furthermore, the U.S. helped to alter change and then reverse the revolution. Castillo Armas's rule has been supported by the elites, the United Fruit Company, the Department of State. They abolished political parties, they tortured, executed, jailed, exiled opponents, and they reversed all the land policies. And so this is what happened to Guatemala. Let's go to Bolivia. And in Bolivia, the causes of the revolution were illiteracy, undernourishment, sickness, low income, a short life expectancy, landless Indians, middle groups, and the industrial workers agitated for change. The economy was dependent on a major export, which was tin, which was in control by one corporation. There was a war for change that was initiated. There was a war with Paraguay over control of the natural resources. It humiliated Bolivia, and this led to certain ideas with regards to Bolivian nationalism. In 1937, oil is going to be expropriated by a colonel who attempted to control the tin barons, but is going to be ousted. In the 1940s, there's much turmoil, but eventually this one president named Paz Estoncero, a national revolutionary movement, is going to organize in 1941, and not until 1951 do they succeed. They were supported by the middle-class students, organized labor, and rural landless. In 1952, they nationalized the tin mine. There was rural agitation that occurred in the urban industrial workers. This becomes more important in the urban industry than the peasants. This is going to be significant, especially with regards to the pink tide later on. But 1952 and 53, the native peoples are going to rebel in Bolivia. In 1953, land reform is going to be put in the Constitution as a result of that. And the idea is to redistribute the land to the native population. In 1956, there's going to be some struggles with regards to the presidency, but the military finally by 1972 is going to take over. It's going to be reactionary, it's going to be repressive, it's going to be anti-national. and it's going to be the revolution, the Bolivian revolution is going to be redirected. The United States provided huge amounts of money for the national budget since 1953. It supported the moderate middle-class leaders and by investing heavily in the economy, and it jointly encouraged the suppression of radical working class and peasants through the intervention of the CIA. It favored eventual military rule. The consequences and the results of this is that there was co-optation, and the revolutionary process was stopped. It was stymied. Again, it's going to be picked up later on with the rise of the pink tide. Okay, so we finished with regards to understanding and appreciating something about revolution.
You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.